Welcome to the Space for It with Makayla and Jacob. We are two therapists working to navigate making space for what comes up as part of the human experience.
Hi, I'm Makayla, and yeah, there's a lot of things that get missed in our busy lives, and how human of us for that to be the case. So, we want to create some intentional space to slow down and explore some of these things that could be valuable to us that might get missed.
And as part of this first conversation, thought it would make sense to just allow us to help everyone else get to know us just a little bit better. That is how that sentence makes the most sense. So to get started, I'm going to ask Makayla some questions and then we'll just have a conversation, make some space for it. Many of these questions are going to be therapy centric because we are
Yeah.
therapists after all. And therefore, this first one is going to be what drew you to the mental health field?
I have always liked helping people, and I'm not sure if that was like a people pleasing like survival mechanism growing up, or I think it partially was influenced by that, and then partially the people around me were very kind and generous, and my parents, and so it came naturally to me. It was something I was gifted at. um, that kind of emotional intelligence, I feel like, was more where my skill sets um, were strongest. So as I grew up, I luckily had a lot of support in being able to explore different studies and found myself drawn to psychology. Um, I love traveling and found myself just drawn to people in different places and wanted to better understand why we struggle, why we suffer, and what there is to be done about it. Like, how do we um, learn how to do that differently or better? That was another piece of growing up as a the baby of the family, of two. So my older sister, I got to watch her make mistakes, and trudge through just figuring out how to be a human. And I learned a lot from that. And so I think it became a natural tendency for me to observe what was going on around me in many, pretty much every area of my life, actually, and then to learn from it and try and do it differently or better. So I think that's something I applied to this. And funny enough, I had never seen a counselor until I believe my senior year, junior or senior of college, when I was incredibly stressed. And one of my friends who'd seen a counselor um, before kind of nudged me to be like, hey, like maybe you should talk to someone. And I was so offended, as many people are when you say, like, hey, like maybe some help would be nice. I was like, how are you kidding me? That, like, that's what you're saying to me right now. Um, but I listened and thought about it and signed up. And then I was like, this is amazing how well it works and how nice it is to just have someone be able to listen to you and hear what you have to say and understand your experience and help you make sense of it and help you see things that you didn't see before. So after that experience, I think I just really got more curious, and kind of drawn to the field of counseling and started moving more in that direction, majored in psychology on top of Spanish, and went and worked in a clinic for a while to kind of get some experience and see what it was like, and then went back to school and was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try and help other people get through this human experience, and bring a little more community and openness to it than I maybe had when I was younger.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That progression of like, seeing the gifting of listening to people and observing and learning from their experiences, learning from watching your older sister, and then also having that experience of going into college and then being told, hey, you should maybe talk to somebody, and then taking that with you into developing this interest. Like that's cool. That's really cool. And I'm curious.
Mhm.
When you go into the field already with the the experience of I'm a good listener, what has it been like to then receive all of the training on how to listen as a professional, and how has that shifted your perspective towards listening?
Initially, it was listening just to have people be heard, which I think is can be incredibly valuable,
Mm,
and was for a lot of people growing up. Now it's kind of changed where I can listen differently to hear where are people's minds working in a way that is a really natural tendency, and it's keeping them stuck or getting them stuck or kind of not helping them, and being able to listen for those kinds of things and invite different perspectives or different ways of thinking about things. So it's a more intentional listening that I do now, and still very present. There's still some similarities of being very present focused and just being with that other person in this crazy, weird, fun, wild human experience that we're all having. And unless you believe in certain things, most of us have never done this before. Um, and so we're all doing it and we're doing our best.
well, I appreciated that distinction that you made there between listening just to hear, but also then listening for the specific pieces of someone's experience and where they're at, as well as where they're trying to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's important. It's good.
Yeah, I like that distinction because that brings a great piece when you're just listening that's very present focused or even past focused, but then also adding that like where they're headed and how to help them get there. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, that's helpful too.
awesome. Okay, so this next question, that first one was professional. This next one is just fun and personal. If I were to find you on a random Sunday afternoon, where would I find you? What would you be
You
doing?
would probably find me on the soccer field, at either the indoor facility or at a local park. I That's my Sunday thing, in pretty much year round actually. I'll have at least one game, something I've been playing since I was about 5 years old, and it's something that I've just feeds it's just such a passion, feeds my heart, and soul, and kind of refills my energy, lets me be really present and get into that flow state, that moving meditation where I'm not thinking but I'm just doing, and I have yeah, just a sense of peace and enjoyment there. So that's pretty much mainly where you'd find me on a Sunday. Yeah.
Nice. That's
And then
awesome.
maybe at Costco or TJ Maxx after that, because my mom and I like to go there after we play sometimes.
There's a huge contrast between those two stores. You, you almost could
Yeah.
not get more different.
It just depends on the day.
Mm.
Do we need groceries? Do we need not we probably don't need them, but are we gonna go look at clothes and house decor and things like that? Yeah.
Who is someone who has played an integral part in shaping who you are as a therapist?
I think the person that has helped shape my professional self, or yeah, really like my overall um, current self, is probably my mentor and professor from grad school, Jeff. Shout out. He is wonderful. And I don't know, as I went through grad school, I did a lot of learning, and not only like textbook learning, but the kind of learning I took it upon myself to really like embody what I was learning, to try different things on for myself very intentionally so that I could have that experience and know if it worked, if it didn't, um, what it felt like, and kind of so I could relate those experiences, and have more compassion for people that I would be inviting into those experiences. Um, And I think the way that he practices, which is a very inviting thing. It's not telling you what to do. It's not super direct and confrontational, which I don't do well with personally. It's just not my style. But really inviting into like, let's explore this. Let's try this on. What do you think about this? And having that listening where you can tell like they're fully present and hearing what you're saying and they care. Um, and they have all the time for you. Like they're not rushed. Having someone like that really drew me in. And it made me want to listen to what they had to say because they feel very wise. Um, and they were modeling that embodiment of the theory of the practice that they are trying to teach others. So I I felt there was a lot of integrity there in line with their values, and that was someone I wanted to be like, to emulate, and have and continue to do so. They're my supervisor at the moment too, and I still connect in consultation groups that they lead and things. So still very present in my professional life.
That's awesome. That's incredible. What a cool thing to have such a tangible example that you can kind of see modeled for you and then follow.
Mm-hmm.
And to actually get to interact with them still on a regular basis, that's amazing too. That's really valuable.
Yeah, I feel very, very lucky and very grateful, and I love to be able to share that through cards or words when I get to see them, and it's cool because it feels like we're co-creating together. There's my perspective too, and maybe that's another piece that I really enjoy about that relationship is when they listen, it feels like they are seeing things differently as well, um, and maybe yeah, learning from the way I see it too. It's not just a one way.
Yeah,
Very lucky.
that's great. That fits so well in the like in the socially constructive roots of what counseling actually is.
Yeah,
Which is awesome.
I agree.
Okay. I have two more questions.
All right.
First one, what has been going on in your life recently that a year ago you never would have expected?
So many things. Oh my gosh. I don't know why. And my brain is starting to understand that like we can't plan for everything. Like we can't plan more than the day or the week. Or if we do, I mean, there's just we're probably wasting a lot of energy. We can have general ideas, but to really try and nail everything down too, it is just not helpful. So a year ago today, I was probably like my partner was going off to their seasonal work, and I was getting ready for the summer. I had just started my business a couple months prior. Um, I just started taking insurance and getting a couple clients. Um, I have no idea where I thought I'd be a year from now or from then. I did think I'd have a few more clients by now, so that's something that's been a little different. It's been a little slower to build, and I'm figuring that out. Also, recently though, that I would never have seen coming is us, my partner and I, buying a house and going to move here soon. Um, that's been a really fun, exciting, scary, crazy journey that we're on right now that I figured was at least a few years down the road. But here we are. Yeah, what else is going on? My aunt recently passed away. Didn't see that coming. And it's been really neat in a lot of ways to have a lot more conversations with my family about death and dying and what we all think and feel and experience, and getting to talk about our connections to each other and um, what we want when we die, things like that. So it's simultaneously been difficult and really wonderful, which I may not have seen coming either. Being able, my family, my dad, my mom didn't get to go, but my dad and my sister and I went to a death cafe, which I'd never heard
Mm,
about before,
mm.
where we just talked to strangers about death and what we think about it. And so that was really cool. Um, a year ago, I also recently started a sticker decal temporary
Mm.
tattoos that are inspired by compassion based phrases and come with compassionate skills cards. And that's been really fun to put out
Yeah.
into the world and to just play with and explore and be creative. I never would have seen that coming either.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of different things.
That was that was so many things. That
Yeah.
the combination of all of that sounds both like an emotional roller coaster and also especially in relation to moving and everything. Sounds exhausting.
Yes. Yeah, I can with full confidence say I am a little run down at the moment. So I'm trying to find some ease and intentionally rest a little bit more right now while I have some time. My partner's out of town for a day or two, so I have a soccer tournament this weekend. I'm just gonna try and enjoy that and not really do much moving or house stuff and no work beyond today
Nice.
for the weekend
There you
anyway.
go.
Yeah.
The final question. I would love to hear just a little bit about your practice, like who you predominantly work with, who you like working with, and how you work with them.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So my practice is located here in Boise, Idaho. It's called With LLC. Um, as we are with each other, we get to learn to be with our emotions, with our experiences in different ways. So that's where the name came. Um, and to move with our humanity instead of trying to fight against it, learning what it's like, what our natural tendencies are. Um, so there's a main portion or foundation of my practice is built in compassion and mindfulness. Um, and that comes really well through the theory I work with, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, that has a lot of basis in um, Buddhist psychology and really just being present, connected to what we care about, and learning skills of how to work with our brain better. So I mainly, at the moment, I work with adults only, and I have a vast range in that. um, from people who are 19 all the way up to mid 60s, mid to late 60s, which is really fun to get to see people across all ages and what they're experiencing and how what I've learned can still be helpful. How this is a human thing. It's not necessarily an age thing or um, yeah, there's just a lot of crossover. There's a lot of connection. So and a lot of common humanity, which I really appreciate and consistently reminds me to, I don't know, be humble and be grateful and to wish the best for all people. Because it's not easy for anyone to be human. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't have a specific, or I guess I do. And my specific kind of specialty or niche is like working with childhood trauma,
Mm.
anxiety, and life transitions. Um, and at the same time, I work with people across a lot of other things, including like depression or prolonged grief. Uh, so it spans a wide range at the moment.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. And way to go. Way to go at actually taking the initiative, starting a practice. I know you mentioned in answering the last question, it hasn't gone quite as quickly as you thought it would, or maybe wanted it to. But It's such a cool thing to get to do, and hearing how you bring your theory into actually working with your clients, I think it's a really cool thing.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been a wild journey. I could learn to be a counselor, but not to start a business. And then I learned to start a business so I could be a counselor. And that's been a journey too. And I think all the skills I've learned in being a counselor have helped me to hold myself through that and, yeah, help me get here. So still building, still being patient, and still working towards a more sustainable, um, little bigger client load. But yeah, some other fun streams too, like with the stickers or potential retreats, things like that. So it's a journey that I'm on for sure.
Like,
Um,
there's there's so many ways to make space for the human experience.
mhm, definitely. And I want to make space for your human experience as well right now. So thank you for asking me all those wonderful questions. And I want to ask you some too.
Go
So
for
to keep it a little similar or aligned with what you asked, and just to because I'm curious, but that first question of like, what drew you to the mental health field? How did you get here? I would love to know more.
it. In a somewhat similar way to you, I was always kind of the listener, like either the listener or the wallflower, like the person who's just side of the room, not saying anything, paying attention.
Mm,
Um, and initially, what I wanted to do when I was in high school and even in college was I wanted to start like a youth camp.
mm,
And when I was between my junior and senior year of college, I did an internship over the summer where I was a backpacking guide in Washington. And I took underprivileged, like at-risk kids from Seattle and Spokane out into the North Cascades for like 5 days at a time,
wow.
and learned that I had no idea what to say to anyone who's different in life experience than me.
Mm,
And so that kind of pointed me in this direction of, this is awesome to like do these things in the wilderness to be around people and support them, but I have no idea what I'm doing. And so I
mm,
went back, and in my last year of undergrad, I took a counseling class and fell in love. I was like, this is amazing. Um, and that was very much the thing that started the ball rolling for me to then, a year after I graduated from undergrad, I went back, got a master's in counseling, and I love it. Ever since then, like it's been a huge part of my life. And I think as is true, you kind of mentioned this, but I think it's true for many mental health professionals. When you study these things, it's not that they become who you are, but they become a big part of your life. Because yes, we are very much human. We make mistakes. We are not perfect to be in relationship with. Life is messy, but also you have all of these pieces to how you function that come into your life as part of your education that you then hold all the time. And for me, like I've always loved that, other than in the areas of life where it's like, oh, I'm messing things up right now, but it's fine. Like there's so much, I think there's so much value in consciously thinking about the way that you're living, the decisions that you're making, how you're interacting with people. And I think that's one of the things that I love about this, because I tend to be a very naturally curious person, and I love hearing people's stories, and I love the honor of being allowed in to witness and to listen. Like that's an amazing experience. And I think I probably veered slightly off from your question, but in short, that's how I got here.
I love it. Yeah, you can feel. I feel the passion and the excitement in the veering off, and it relates also. I don't know how much it really was veering, but just like getting lost in that passion of being able to be with people in these spaces, getting to know people intimately and what they're going through. And how neat to be able to use your skills like of curiosity and caring and listening, and then to hone them in this way, where now you get to do this as a career. Um, that's pretty cool.
It's
And
really
I love too, instead of getting discouraged with like, I don't know what I'm doing, you were like, okay, what do I do so that I do know what I'm doing? You took that in a different way. And that led you here. So
it,
even, yeah,
that's
even a
that's
little
funny because
discomfort was helpful.
the the way that I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and it has been a point of conversation with my wife and I. Um, when I encounter a problem, if I feel like it's impossible, I will wrestle with it for a certain amount of time, usually not that long, like an hour, 2 or 3 hours, and I'll get very discouraged. And then I reach a tipping point where I jump from I'm really discouraged, I don't know what to do, to I'm going to solve this. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make things different than they are.
Mhm.
And I think I've done that for almost my entire life, most of it without thinking about it.
Hmm.
I think that that has served me very well.
Yeah. And even just bringing more awareness to like, this is how I process things. So when I am getting discouraged, I'm right on the cusp of being to that point of like determined. That's part of the process too. So yeah, that's so neat. I love that. Um, yeah, I love that. I my next question um, is what's similar and what's different about counseling than what you thought it would be like?
Ooh, that's a great question. I, it's funny. I'm one of those therapists who had never gone to counseling before I started the program. Um, and I didn't know what it would be like. I went to my first grad school class, and the professor asked the class, "Who here is going to get licensed?" And everybody else raised their hands. So I raised my hand because I'm like, "You can get licensed. What does that even mean?" Because I had no idea. I knew nothing. I just I think I went into it thinking. So this is the answer to the question. I think I went into it thinking I'm gonna learn all the answers here,
Mm,
and I'm gonna learn how to maybe give people those answers. And it was not that way at all, because a lot of what you're trying to do as a counselor, as a therapist, is not tell people how to live. It's not give them the answers. It's how to. There's a psychiatrist who talks about this a lot. His name is Frank Anderson, and he does a lot of work on trauma. But he talks about how when someone goes to therapy, the therapist is there trying to help them find their own voice. Like,
mm,
they're there to bring out and draw out like the wisdom that they have already, and honor that. And I
mm,
think that's a very like that looks different depending on the therapist, depending on the modality, how they do that. But that's a very valuable way of empowering people to see that, yeah, like you may be struggling, you may be suffering, but also you have these resources, you have this ability within you to figure out, okay, where am I trying to get? What do I need to do to get there?
yeah. Mm. I love that. And what comes to mind for me as you say that is the instead of giving a man a fish or a woman a fish or someone a fish, uh, teaching someone to fish and learn how to like really be able to look within to their skills, their values, their um yeah, their ability, their capacity to help themselves and in connection, how do they connect to the people who can help them, their support system or something too, like so but it's teaching them how to do that instead of being the answer or giving the answer, um, which is very much more empowering.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so it sounds like when you first started, you're like, I want to learn the answers. And now you're like, I want to help people find their answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I think I think a big misconception about therapy is that therapists give the answers.
Mm.
And I don't think people realize how terrifying that would actually be. Because if I give you the answers based on my life, odds are they're the wrong answers for you. And if you actually do them, then I'm pseudo responsible for what goes wrong because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a very similar experience that ties into this. Um, just what you're talking about, feeling starting my practice last year and that like imposter syndrome, feeling like I had to have the answers for people. And then really through supervision and learning over the last year from you as well, we got to connect while I was clientless and just building my practice. But really coming to that place of inviting people to experiment and explore like what the answers for them could be to practice and try things on and see what works. And it's so much less paralyzing to be able to do it that way and not feel like I have to have the answers. And like you say, it doesn't work that way. It's not that's just not how it is. I couldn't give you the answers because I haven't lived your life. Um so yeah, I love that. What a neat thing to learn. Going to a more fun question. Um what would you say is the main thing you do outside of counseling that brings you joy?
Mhm. So I have a bunch of children, which I've officially just started calling them a bunch because I have three and then one more on the way that's going to arrive. Hopefully not before 3 months from now, but we'll see. Um, and much of my time outside of counseling is with them, and they like that brings me so much joy getting to play with them, wrestle with them, like laughing, reading books, giggling, doing all the things, going to the park. I love that. And then the other thing that I do is like I consider this kind of outside of work, even though it's not really. I make a lot of mental health content. So I do a lot on TikTok, I do a lot on Instagram. Um, and one of the biggest things I talk about is probably dyslexia, which is an ironic thing because that isn't necessarily what I set out to talk about, but it's such an important thing to be talked about that there aren't a lot of professionals talking about.
Mm,
And so I do.
yeah. And this sense of joy. Say a little bit more about that being able to share this thing, kind of like this being the space for it. It sounds like that needed some space and you created it.
So a dyslexic trait is answering questions in story. So there's that.
Okay.
Um, when I was a kid, like my parents always said, "Oh, like you're dyslexic," and I never knew what that meant, as very few people do. It's like, oh, so you just struggle with like letters getting backwards sometimes, and maybe reading is hard.
Mhm.
And that was how I understood it all the way up through like my mid 20s. And in my mid 20s, I read a book called The Dyslexic Advantage, which takes a very like positive perspective on
Mhm.
dyslexia. And it was really interesting reading it because it was this experience of, oh, you mean the way that I am and how my life has been, I'm not the only one. And it's actually very connected to this. It's connected to being dyslexic. Who
Mm,
knew? And it was this bizarre, eye-opening, encouraging, but also maybe slightly discouraging, like, oh, I could have done things differently better if I'd known this
mm,
sooner. But overall, it was this incredible experience. And as I've started talking about it on social media, I get a lot of feedback from people saying, oh my goodness, like I never understood this. Like I've always felt negatively towards myself because I thought this was just like I thought I did this because I was dumb.
mm,
And it turns out that's a struggle because of dyslexia. That's a struggle because of this part of me that's just different.
mm,
And making space for that and sharing those things with people has been so cool. Like that has been as much as it's not what I set out to do. And as much as I'm interested in everything and hate the idea of like I'm going to pigeonhole myself into something, it has been a really cool experience get get to do that and to get to be a small part of other people's stories in that way.
Yeah. So I hear themes of being able to connect with people, but also validate, or and I guess also validate their experiences and bring some awareness and understanding um, for what they've experienced, and not they're not alone in that. And being able to do that for you was so valuable, and so now offering that to others, I could see, yeah, just the smile that that would bring, and being able to share that. How neat. And I wonder, the piece of being with your kids, you talked about like laughing, and it sounds like there's so much more presence. So what do your kids teach you, or one or two things that bring you joy, or that you get to be reminded of, that, yeah, that they bring?
Being a parent is a funny thing because they bring me so much joy, and they also bring out all of the other emotions. Like,
Mm,
I have learned a lot of patience from my children. I've demonstrated a lack of patience with my children.
mm,
I I have learned also so much about like being gracious and compassionate.
mm,
Like, so often I think it's easy to develop this mindset that's very self-critical, that's like, nope, ruined it all. I'm not good enough. I'm fill in the blank. And what's fascinating with kids is that they're so loving, they're so forgiving, they're so compassionate, and it's simple. Like, one of the things, one of the pieces to this that I love talking about is like, when you think about doing something for someone,
mhm,
it's very easy to have this idea of like, I need to do it perfectly. It needs to be really good. And so, an example of that would be if somebody asked you to draw a picture, you'd probably want it to be a picture that anybody could look at and say, oh, yeah, I know exactly what that is. I am not an artist in terms of being able to draw or paint or anything.
mm.
But when one of my kids will ask me, like, hey, can you draw a picture of us, or I can draw a stick figure, and it's the most amazing thing in the world.
Mm,
And the shift away from things have to be this set perfect way towards this is 10% talent and 90% imagination, and it's amazing.
mm,
Like, I think that's such a valuable reminder because a lot more of life could be that way
mm,
if we allowed it to be. If we allowed ourselves to focus on essentially like holding the joy and not being so critical, but instead being curious and enjoying what is. Like, I think that's a huge thing I learned from my kids all the time,
yeah,
or am constantly reminded of,
yeah.
of by them.
I love that. Yeah, and it's like, where this is something we've learned. A lot
Mhm.
of what we do or we experience is learned. So we can also learn something else, or relearn what is within us, what's at our core, that love, that compassion, that grace and presence. How neat that they get to connect you to that
Mhm.
daily.
It's really fun.
Next question I guess I would ask would be about your mentor, or someone
Mhm.
who's influenced you deeply, and whether they continue to do so or not.
My this is similar to yours. My advisor for my dissertation um, was incredible. Uh, Her name was Dr. Patrick, and my interactions with them changed a lot of the way that I thought about interacting with people.
Mm,
They were one of the first people in my life who, when I would interact with them, I was like, wow, like, you're really listening. Like, you're not just listening, you're treating me like I have something to say, like I have something to contribute, and you're just curious.
mm,
And we would sit down. This is funny because a lot of people, I think, you think, okay, you're going to go have a meeting about your dissertation, and it's going to be fairly dry and research based. And we would sit down for hours and have these conversations that would like start here with the topic and then just drift everywhere. And
yeah.
every time I would walk out of her office just like absolutely energized, like, oh my goodness, this is so interesting. I have so many thoughts. I want to learn more. I want to do more.
Mm,
And her way of interacting with me is something that has absolutely turned into like this is what I want to give people. Like this is how I want to sit with the people who I'm connecting with. I want to give them the space to be seen and honored and heard and to be curious.
mm.
And that I would say that is probably she's probably been one of the, if not the most significant in terms of just how I am as a therapist.
Wow. How neat to have that experience. And it sounds like really as she listened and was curious and was hearing you, you just felt valuable, felt worthy, felt, you know, um, good enough, which I feel like so many of us struggle with or don't feel we don't get that interaction. But to be able to have someone like that to just and some of that sounds really simple too in a way, being just really present, again curious and listening wholeheartedly, um, and then for that to be so impactful too, to be like that, I want to give that to people, like wow, I can feel it just thinking about that as you say it, just kind of feeling the how valuable that is and could be for so many people. I'm sure your clients feel that every day, and the people you interact with, um, yeah, we feel that. It's an energy thing. As much as it is the words we say, there's a lot more to it.
It's such a unique thing to experience. And I'm definitely I'm definitely still always learning how to do it better. Uh, And still like I don't get to talk to her as much, but when I do, every time it's still this incredible like I love this.
Oh yeah, that's so neat. Yeah, and I love that too, that piece of returning to it, like, and learning to do it better. It's a practice. It's not just a something you are or aren't, but something you got to observe and feel and experience, and then something now you practice and continue
Mhm.
to learn and return to. Um, that's amazing. Yeah. My last question for you would be, what's an area that you want to grow in over the
Mhm.
next year, whether that's personal or professional?
I have resisted so much focus in terms of like I'm going to do one thing really well.
Mm,
And instead, I want to do everything. I want to make the space for everything. Cough, cough.
mm.
Um, and I know that as much as I enjoy parts of that and like that warm fuzzy feeling of like I can do it all, um, I know that also holds me back some professionally. It keeps me from really being able to dive as deep as I probably could into any one thing.
Mm,
And the thing that I want to grow in is getting better at saying, you know what? I'm going to focus on one thing. I'm going to
mm,
make one thing not the sole priority, but a much bigger priority in an effort to actually do it really, really well.
mm.
And that's hard for me. Like I chafe at that and I resist it. And I even had a friend had a friend point this out the other day. Because again, I have this audience on social media that wants me to talk about dyslexia. And I'm like, great, I don't want to talk about it. And she was laughing at me because she was like, you're the only one who could have tens of thousands of people who want you to talk about one thing. And your response would be like, no, I'm not going to talk about it. And it's like, that's true. And probably a little bit foolish and probably an area where I should maybe investigate, relook at things.
Mm,
So that is the area I'm trying to grow in.
okay. So being able to say no to other things and kind of prioritize and choose what's valuable to you and where you want to really dive a little deeper, like you say. Um, yeah. I wonder what's one step you've taken or take or could take that would lead you a little closer to that.
Mm. in the last 2 weeks, uh, I've transitioned the focus of a lot of the content that I make
Mm,
away from being like 1/3 to 1/4 about dyslexia, which is the thing I think most people want me to talk about.
mm,
I've transitioned away from that being a quarter or third to that being most of what I talk about, like three
mhm.
quarters of it at least.
Okay.
And I've allowed myself to actually dive into, okay, yeah, I'm gonna read a study about this almost every day. I'm going to actually start figuring out what I could really do to contribute valuably here. And one of the big things, like this is the overarching goal. You can keep me accountable to do this. Uh, Mental health professionals in general know nothing about dyslexia. And so the story that you hear from so many dyslexic people is they're like, I went to therapy because dyslexic individuals are about twice as likely as the normal population to have anxiety or depression.
Yeah.
And so they go to therapy for that. And the therapists are like, well, this is great. We'll work with you on your anxiety and depression. And so they try and help them with that. And it sort of helps. But then they talk about some of these other struggles that they have in life with reading and with all of the different areas of life that dyslexia impacts. And the therapists are like, well, you're just lazy. Like you're not
Mm,
working hard enough. You're if you'd put a little bit more effort in, then it would be better,
mm,
which is wrong and harmful and
yeah.
hurtful. And so one of the things I'm working on is trying to create essentially a free curriculum that I'm probably going to do as like a video curriculum that'll just be on YouTube that will educate therapists specifically, like what is dyslexia? How do you support dyslexic individuals? Like
Mm,
let's amplify some of the voices that need to be heard here and give people the resources to actually learn about this so that we can better serve an entire population. That
yeah.
is a huge population. It's like 14, 15, 16% of everybody.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
tens of millions of people.
Yeah. That's amazing. And to be able to see this need and be able to speak to it and dive into it deeply. And then also to help other clinicians be able to better serve that population. Like what a project. And so neat. Like there's still all this space for us to learn how to do this better. I just think there's so much we think we know as
Mhm.
humans, and again, how human of us to think we know it all. And there's still so much space for us to create for all these different things.
It's very
This
true.
will be the space for some of that.
Well, this is the space for it.
Yes.
So, on that note, to anybody who listened to this and who made it this far, I know from making other content on social media that the percent of listeners that make it to the end is usually in the single digits. So, if you're one of our family members or friends who know that this existed and who made it to the end, thank you for being here. We look forward to going on the journey of making space for things with you. And that is all for now.
All right. We'll see you next time.